now, and I'll just. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Virtual Therapeutic Recreation Institute. Today we have Gail, who is doing Building Rapport with Your Clients Through Storytelling. Just to give you a little bit of an introduction, my name is Nikki. I'm from the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society. I'm filling in for Dan while he is running another session. Gail founded the Legacy Recorder and self-published the Legacy Recorder Community Guide in an effort to share her passion for storytelling and penchant for writing about hard things, including death and dying. Her mission is to help others create deeper, lasting connections through intergenerational storytelling. Today, her storytelling methods and project approach are being used by people globally. As a speaker, Gail has presented on a myriad of topics, including, but not limited to, storytelling, social media, how to talk to your kids, branding, and death. On and off the stage, she has worked to foster community and connections for a variety of events and communities. Most recently, and I'm not sure what those hashtags stand for, but hashtag SMWL19 and SMWL20. So Gail can tell us a little bit more about those in just a second. As a ghostwriter, Gail has completed 8 manuscripts over the last 7 years, in addition to cultivating a consistent technical writing based clientele in construction and product development sectors. She is a writer, author, business consultant, and millennial mother of 3 future creatives who in the present day give her daily inspiration and a few gray hairs. She is an enthusiastic supporter of local music, local coffee shops, and new writers looking to make their way. Just a few housekeeping points. This is a Zoom meeting, and there will be times where we do breakout rooms. And meeting participants will have the ability to unmute themselves and speak. If you're not speaking, we ask that you mute yourself to minimize background noise. And you can use the chat box for questions or to alert us if you have any kind of problem with the Zoom or a concern with the session. This session is approved for 1.5 NCTRC credits or 1 CEU. At the end of this session, you will see a SurveyMonkey link. I will also put it in the chat box. And you will complete the evaluation and enter your code word, which I will be giving shortly, and you will receive your continuing education credit or NCTRC credit. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gail. Again, please feel free to use the chat box with any questions or concerns. And we look forward to this session. Thank you so much, Gail. And I'm going to stop my share.
Okay. So if you guys are comfortable, you can come on video. If you want to stay off video, that's fine. We will use breakout rooms a little bit depending on how many people hang out. But yeah, we'll get started. Usually you have like about slides. I don't really have about me slides. So we're just gonna go for it. I'm going to change this so I just see myself. Okay. So Nikki very wonderfully read my bio, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time telling you about me. But I think for context, it's important for you to know that what we're going to go through today is based on quite a few years relative to actually how old I am. So I've spent a good quarter of my life, I think, working on how we build rapport with people through storytelling. So specifically in this instance, we're going to talk about clients, and that's going to be the wording I'm using. If you have patients or you're a caregiver or you use a different word to describe the person you're working with, just adapt the language in your head if you're able. So the Legacy Recorder is something I started in 2015. It started as essentially what was going to be a volunteer project of going in and helping people write letters, especially for those who couldn't write letters, had a story they wanted to share. And even if they didn't have someone to send it to, I felt it was really important that they have someone listen and they felt like someone was listening to them. So that's really where this started. What it's grown into is somewhere, early on, a really intelligent human said, "Hey, do you really need a volunteer job?" And I was like, "Yeah, probably not." I was doing scouting and I had kids and all these other things. And so we went through and figured out what a business model could look like. So I run this as a social enterprise. It is for profit, but everything is dedicated to building community and putting money back into our economics and our local ecosystem. I'm local to Butler, Pennsylvania, and the legacy recorder itself is actually global. So there are caregivers all over the world, activity staff people all over the world using this. There's a huge contingent in Australia. I'm not sure what happened, how it got big over there, but Australia and New Zealand are using this in their work. I also know that there are a few people locally who use the legacy recorder and other things I've created to write their memoirs. There's church groups and volunteer groups that are using it to go out and work with homebound people, and really using storytelling tools and things I've created to help them have better, deeper conversations, and really that building rapport, which is in the title of this talk. I've also worked locally with Quality Life Services and Slippery Rock University. I had an active project going for about 2.5 years right before we sort of closed out and did some wrap up things right before COVID happened. So unfortunately that model no longer worked. So I've adapted things to online and really distilled everything down into bite-sized pieces that people can implement if they're solo or if you are low on staff in activities like in care facilities and hospice and those things. So that's really what you're going to be learning today. We're going to do some theory, some context, and background, because I think that's important to help people understand why we're doing it and where it came from. And then we'll actually do some practical exercises, and you'll have a chance to, you can think of it as role playing if you'd like, but you'll have a chance to work together and actually get to know your fellow attendees, which doesn't usually happen. So with that, if you have questions on anything I just talked about, feel free to pop them in the chat, but we'll keep rolling. So this is building rapport with your clients through storytelling. I'm Gail, and I own the legacy recorder. It's just me. So if you go to the website and you're like, oh my gosh, there's like all this stuff, there's not. It's really just me. I have an incredible VA who helps me with social and stuff. And together we keep the engine running. So I just wanted to cover a couple benefits. The biggest one that I lead off with is that it restores human dignity. And this happens in a variety of ways. But the biggest part is just the act of listening and having engaged listening with someone. I've found that that's one of the most powerful things. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. If they can't remember their childhood, if they can't remember different things, that's not really important. Like, it's important, but it's not as important as taking the time to listen to them, even like no matter what they're talking about. And as I'm going through this, I'm going to make some assumptions. A couple things I'm going to assume is that you are already doing a lot of this in your work. So this is more of a value add, amplifying what you're already doing. If you find something that you can integrate into it, those are my goals for you. Another benefit is that you actually help someone tell their story. What I found is that when we ask someone a question that they wouldn't normally get asked, they are much more likely to talk about it again to another person, or share it with a friend, or share it with a family member. And then those connections and everything just get deeper and better and more robust. So when we have short conversations with people using storytelling, it really has this ripple effect that we just can't even fathom. You'll also have the opportunity to learn something new about the other person, and sometimes about yourself. I've had really cool things happen where connections have happened that really would not have happened otherwise. So those are just a couple of benefits. And we're going to start with laying the foundation. So I have a construction background, so most of my language is foundation and building and those sorts of things. So we're going to cover 5 components that are really focused in on building rapport and making someone feel comfortable. So I don't add the other S word to the end of this, but keeping it simple. I always advocate that we start with yes or no questions when we're starting conversations. It's something that it's really definitive. They don't have to think about it. So it's also important that we frame our questions that they can be yes or no, that there's no vagueness. So a simple one that we're going to go over as an example is, did you smile yesterday? They either did or they didn't. There's no nuance. The next part of it is asking things that someone can answer easily without having to make a decision. So there's yes, no questions. And then there's other ones that they can give really definitive answers. And we'll go through those in here in a little bit. And as we're starting off in conversations is being able to answer honestly and without stress. This is kind of, it's kind of an art form, so it takes a lot of practice as the interviewer. And so just have grace with yourself. It's not always going to be perfect. I've put together pieces that you can start with to take the guesswork out for you. So listening with intention is the next component. Really not being distracted. I try not to start conversations or storytelling conversations with people unless I can actually focus in on them. Being present in the moment is super important. There's nothing worse than starting a conversation with someone or having someone start a conversation with you and then they're like, they're off somewhere else. Now, for people who are neurodivergent or eye contact is harder for them, it's also important to know who your storyteller is, because those are things that can impact how they interact with you. And it doesn't mean that they don't want to have the conversation or they're not engaged. They just engage differently. So it's important that your client feels heard and seen. And that's where that list, doing all of those things, not being distracted, being present, that's where those things come in. It really lets them know that you care about what they have to share. And that all comes back to that restoring human dignity part. The next component is actually sharing your experience. So how I teach storytelling and within the legacy storytelling method is that it's just as important to share your experience and your story as it is to listen to theirs. And it's not always appropriate, which is why that's the first bullet point. So taking self-assessment and the situational assessment of where you are and deciding whether or not it's appropriate to share is important. But sharing your story lets them know you're invested in them as a person. You being vulnerable in some cases or just taking a moment to share a part of your life with them lets them know you see them as a human. And that's really where some of that restoring human dignity comes in. It also creates new lines of communication. And if you have things in common with them, those are also super important. So to give you an example, like real world. So let's say someone is a nurse in a care facility and you only see someone twice a day or once a day even, because that's when you're on shift and that's when medication is given. So you have 5 minutes with someone, maybe, and you're giving medication. So you do the same action every day. And maybe you have the same conversation. You talk about how they're feeling. I usually use bowel movements as an example. But my value add to that and my addition is, hey, why don't we ask if they smiled yesterday, especially if you're talking to them in the morning. And then we'll go through this exercise here in a minute, but really thinking through how can we get to a point where we have common ground. And if you have things in common with them the next day or the next day after that, they might say, hey, I remember you mentioned this and this. Can you tell me more about that? And that it helps keep the conversation going with that person. Follow-up. So follow-up questions are so unbelievably important. I give really concrete examples of what good follow-up questions can look like. And that's like, we have an hour and a half together, it's at the end. But follow-up questions lead to more storytelling paths. So listening with intention, having the engaged listening, hearing what they're saying, and being able to ask follow-up questions based on what they said can help expand stories, fill in gaps. I've also seen it inform care plans. So you might be able to find something out about them or about a certain situation or a trigger or something that stresses them out that's not on their intake paperwork. And that's another part of where this really comes into play in care facilities and in hospice, is that when we have storytelling conversations, there's different facts and pieces of a person that can be added to care plans that didn't come up in intake paperwork. Follow-up questions, on the other hand, can also lead to dead ends. If a question or a line of conversation seems to make someone stressed or uncomfortable, depending on the situation, depending on the situation, just leave it alone. go somewhere safe. And that really is something that you'll have to feel out on your own. If you're not sure, talk to a supervisor. I give some examples on the website that where dead ends can be things we don't want to go into, and sometimes there's space to push. It really just depends on the person, your availability that day, and how far you're willing to go. So really taking into account your client or storyteller, um, choosing follow-up questions that'll guide them to a comfortable place that allows for storytelling moments. So our goal is always to keep them talking and to help them continue sharing their story. So using follow-up questions that will help do that is the best route to go. And encouraging and support. Probably you're already doing this on your best days and on your good days, but being encouraging as your client talks and shares that story, that's, being towards them, using body language to let them know you're listening, smiling, um, making eye contact if they're comfortable with eye contact, and oh, look, see, I wrote it all down already. Smiling when appropriate and managing your facial expressions. If you go back and watch this replay, you're going to see some of my micro expressions. I do not always control my face well. So this is something I've had to work really hard on. We have micro reactions and micro facial expressions and different body language things depending on our own human experience, our own life experience, based on someone saying maybe we don't agree with their stance on something. But as the interviewer, as the caretaker, and them as the storyteller and the client, it's important to keep those particular boundaries in. But being encouraging and supporting as much as possible will help with the restoring human dignity component. So before we actually get into the scripts, do we have any questions? Nikki, was there anything in the chat?
There's not currently anything in the chat. Nope.
Cool. Okay, fabulous. Okay, so let's talk 5-minute storytelling scripts. So 5-minute storytelling scripts came from trying to figure out how to teach people how to do this interview style and take advantage of those. I initially called them medicine minutes. Oh yes, okay. So the medicine minutes turned into 5-minute storytelling scripts because I realized that, of course, people could have these not just when they're exchanging medicine, but that's why I always use that example. They're simple talking scripts to help you and your client ease into a conversation. You can really use these anywhere. I've taught my kids how to use them. They range in age from 8 to 15. And it's a really cool way to start a conversation when you don't know anyone, because they're all questions that they can answer without, you don't have to have context to be able to ask them. And cool if my thing worked. So it's a guide to starting storytelling conversations. I kept them super simple on purpose so that you didn't need to have them printed and carried around with you. It's something that with just a couple times of practice and maybe even just the first time, you'll be able to just do on your own without a piece of paper. It's a great way to start building rapport. It also tends to happen, the building rapport part happens faster than if you're not using some sort of interview style. I'm starting to get anxious. It also helps you create the habit of asking questions beyond standard medical "how are you" questions. So what they do is give you essentially a prompt, a starter prompt, like a starter topic, and a framework to walk through a conversation with someone. This is what a printed version might look like. It's a free resource at 5minutestorytelling.com. I have a link to that at the end of the slide presentation, so you don't have to go find it. But as you can see, they're pretty simple. There's a starter question that's a yes or no. I gave the example earlier, but did you smile yesterday? Yes, here's the flow chart and the follow-up questions. If they say no, here's the flow chart and the follow-up questions. So I think there's 6 of these that are pre-done already, just as a starting point. But I found that as people use them, they're able to pick their own topic and come up with their own basic follow-up questions. And then at the end of every script, I have let's jot that down in your memory log. My dream someday is that it will actually be a part of when people do, when they're updating the electronic medical records, like when they're putting in different medical information, that they're using a storytelling script and then putting these answers in there so that it's really part of a person's care plan in a real-time way. So that's something that I'm working towards and networking for and trying to get implemented across the caring industry. Why is it going backwards? Okay. So picking your topic. We want to think about everyday topics. The pre-done ones are did you smile, favorite food, favorite game, favorite music, favorite travel. I think that might, oh, and favorite season. The season one is fun because people usually have a really, it's very divisive. So people either love a season or they hate a season. Sometimes it's in between, but it's neat to see people's answers for that. And the follow-up questions are like, there's so many follow-up questions for that. We'll go more to that in here in a little bit. But using simple topics, you can ease into longer conversations. So if you come up with a topic, picking a topic that you know that you can answer as well helps with the conversational aspect. So if oftentimes someone will come back and say, hey, what's your favorite season? Because they want to know about you as a person too. That's all relative to what their cognitive abilities are and what their self-awareness is, and what stage of life they're in. But often people will ask you back. So think about what your answers will be so you can keep the conversation moving. Choosing a topic you enjoy, even if you might not have it in common with them and easy for you to talk about, means that you'll be able to keep the conversation going without too much effort. Every tool I've created, or every modality I've created, I've tried to make sure that it's something that you can implement without too much energy on your part, because I know that you're already doing so much. So adding one more thing can be super obnoxious. So we try not to add too much. So we talked about that, starting with simple yes or no questions. All questions, yes. Always let them answer first, and then share one of your stories if you're able, feel comfortable. If they don't ask, but they pause and they're quiet for a moment, usually that means you could share if you're comfortable. If you feel like you want them to ask first, then just, keep moving forward. So those are just some pointers on interview and storytelling pieces. Okay, so I have talked, I feel like, for an enormous amount of time. So we are going to do a practice exercise. Before we jump into practice exercises, are there any questions? And I'll explain what we're doing while you think about if you have questions. So we're going to do 2 breakout sessions. We have, how many do we have? Nikki, do we have like 7? 1, 2, 3.
Yes, sorry, I was making sure I wasn't on mute. We have
okay.
7 without myself and you.
Okay, so let's do, we'll do 4 rooms of 2 and throw me into a room.
Okay.
And I'll be the 8th person. Oopsies. Oh, for
Right.
heaven's sakes.
Am I good to do that now, or are you?
Yeah, so for instructions, basically what we're going to do is just walk through a 5-minute storytelling script. I wrote down. So let's do favorite season, and then we'll come back and share, and then we'll break out again. So we'll do 5 minutes in 2 per room. Okay. Okay. So Renee and Heather and I were in a group together. I'm trained that if someone's not on a camera, which Heather told me your camera wasn't working, that they're not available. So I'm sorry we ignored you. But there was a really good example of how these scripts can go into things and where follow-up questions can happen. Heather and we talked about whether or not we smiled yesterday or not. And Heather said that she smiles every day, and whether she's happy or not. And I asked whether she smiled if she was unhappy. And then she didn't answer that question, but what she did was explain that she thinks she smiles all the time because she was trained to smile like that when she was singing in choir. And so then we had a 3-minute conversation about choir, and we ended up having that in common. So a conversation that started with just this 5-minute storytelling script turned into a full-blown conversation, and we now have rapport together. So if I see her again, I can say, hey, blah, 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 blah. And so the next time we have a conversation, we can come back to that, pull on those threads a bit more. And that's just an example of how this can work. If anyone's willing to come off mute and share something that, if there was something like that happened for you in the breakout room, or if you're like, Gail, this is terrible, feel free to pop off and tell me that too.
For us, it was really about, we focused on seasons and smiling. We learned that we had collectively all liked colder weather. And fall was a particular favorite, especially since it's right here, right now. And then about smiling, it was just an excitement for the work we're doing.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Anyone else have any last thoughts to throw in on this before we move on? Cool. Okay. So, we'll go do the next part. And so the last time I did this in a webinar, just for full disclosure, I had 75 people. So it made the randomizing super easy. And we definitely had to stay in breakout rooms because there were just so many. So this next exercise, I haven't decided how we're going to do it yet because there's such a different number. So just so you know, that's what's coming up. Okay. So we have, so the 5-minute storytelling script is like kind of, if you think of it as a starter pack, it's usually the first thing I suggest people jump into if they have never heard of a legacy recorder before. The legacy storytelling method is the format and basically set of interview questions that I suggest everyone start with if they are actually trying to help someone tell a life story, or they're working on a writing project, or just, don't know how to start a diary entry. Like, those are some applications. So this storytelling method is what I use to work with Slippery Rock students, Slippery Rock University students here in Slippery Rock, but in Butler County, and Quality Life Services. So I had students paired up with residents in the care facilities usually over a semester. They would go in once a week and work with them to tell their life story using one prompt every week and using the storytelling method. So at the end of the semester, they had anywhere from 6, 9, 10 stories. And then the resident would actually get a book at the end of it. I'm just checking chat. Oh, cool, Katie. So Katie said that she's an SRU grad. So yes, I really loved that. I really loved doing that with that. It was neat because there was a different group of students every year. I had a couple that stuck through the full 2.5 years. And then right when we were transitioning and changing some things, COVID actually happened. So that totally changed, took away the model essentially. So I've since adapted it to online things. So right now I have a 52 weeks of storytelling video YouTube series that drops every Sunday that walks through this legacy storytelling method and a specific prompt. And there's an accompanying journal and all sorts of things, but it's all based on the work that I did that came out of that original project model. And I'm hoping someday we'll get back to that. Wow, we have a lot of SRU people in here. Gabrielle's in there too. Oh, you guys graduated together. Okay. So I just did this. I'm gonna have to think about the dates. That's not important for this webinar. So I'm getting sidetracked. Legacy storytelling method. So that's just some context. It's been a great way. I know someone who's writing their memoirs using it. So they'll actually have their memoirs completed. They started in January of this year using the 52 weeks of storytelling videos. And they'll have it finished and done and bound by Christmas, essentially, to give out, which I'm super excited for them. And I do set them up so that you can use them in an activities application. So if you have people who can't come out of their rooms, if they're able to watch a video, they can watch it. It's something that can be done like shared screen on a Zoom room with family. If you have still are doing visiting hours with family on Zoom, it's a way to structure visiting time and allow for conversation and give some structure if needed, especially when you don't have lots of staff running around. So that's just some context about how this is being used now. It's something I came up with in more about 2015, 2016. It's what the book's based off of. There's an e-course. anyways, so just so you know, there's lots of things surrounding this. We're just going to go through super basic beginnings, as long as my mouse works. Okay, so we've kind of gone over some of this, but usually from the fact, like, people find it easier to write about something specific. So if we say to someone, tell me something about your life, they either won't be able to answer, or it's going to take a super long time for them to come up with an answer. But if we choose a favorite, a worst, or a very specific memory, that will elicit a much stronger recollection than if you're just going, tell me about something, your childhood. So an upgrade to that question would be, tell me about your favorite childhood memory. If you need to get more specific, and they have like a brother, favorite childhood memory with their brother. And that usually, those kinds of not categories, but being able to filter down and have them narrow in on one thing, they usually can recall faster, and the recollection of the actual facts of the story will be stronger. I can tell you, writing your own life story can be daunting. I literally tell people and teach people how to write their life story, and it's been super hard for me. So I do use my own, I walk my talk, I do use my own framework to write my life story. But having a framework can make it so much easier. It also means that we break the tasks down into smaller pieces so the project can actually be completed. From a hospice is a little different. If you're in hospice, we can talk offline and we can sort of talk through what this might look like. But a somewhat larger scale storytelling project, like I mentioned when I introduced this part of the webinar, is having something that happens over like 6 to 8 weeks. If you can do 6 to 8 months, like that's also a lot longer and super fun. I usually find that 6 to 12 weeks is kind of the sweet spot. When we were doing those projects, there was at least one person that actually didn't live through the whole project, which was awful, obviously, on a number of levels. But what came out of it was that the student was able to get of quite a few stories. So this particular student was super comfortable with talking with people, and it was a really great match. And the person they were talking to was comfortable talking to them. So they were able to build rapport really quickly, and they were able to capture many stories before the person passed away. And so the book was actually something that they were able to give to that person's, I believe, like their children, so adult children. And the book actually had stories that the adult children had never heard before. So it was a really neat thing that they could have. So from project perspective, it's if you need something that's over 6 to 12 weeks, you just need to keep those things in mind, that those things happen. I have tried to account for all of that, and that even just getting one story obviously is better than none. But using a storytelling method, it breaks it into smaller pieces, and you basically outline the story, which is, we'll get into that in a second. So one of the things I have spent a lot of time on is encouraging people to share the emotions in their stories and not just the facts. So we remember things because we were most likely emotional, whether it was happy, sad, all of the range of emotions. And there's usually emotions attached to those memories, but we don't often share those emotions that were attached. And we also don't really write them down. We'll tend to write down like what happened rather than how we were feeling when it happened. Emotions complete the stories of the moments in our lives. And I think it really gives a more robust, it's a fuller picture. So emotion is part of our human experience, and it's a part of our story. And it's not always in our history books. So when we read our history books, yes, we want to read about history, but we don't know like how someone was feeling when this thing happened to them. We can guess, but I'm advocating for writing it down and sharing it with your kids, or sharing it with the people you care for. And also encouraging the people you work with to have them share the emotions, like even if it's sad, even if they were angry, and then explaining why. And we'll get into a little bit of that. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Recalling happy memories can impact how a person feels during and after the recollection. So if you happen to roll down a road that is less than happy, I always try to encourage people to try and come back to a happier moment so that when you finish your storytelling session, the last thing the person remembers is feeling happy. So the next time you have a conversation with them, or if it's a full storytelling session, that they recall feeling happy when they were working with you. So it's easier for them to jump back in, especially if you have like a week or 2 weeks in between when you're having storytelling sessions. So before I get into the actual framework, do you have any questions on that? Usually the answer is no, but this is a good stopping point because I'm starting to get worked up.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat.
Okay, cool. All right. So the framework starts with, there essentially ends up being 7 to 10 questions. That usually for me varies on the prompt. And how many questions I can come up with. We're going to go through the super basic ones. So the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why. I do them in that order on purpose. Usually people can remember who they're with. They can remember what they were doing. Then if they talk through those 2 points, they might be able to remember when it happened. Then I like to ask where it happened. And then the why is usually where people kind of get a little tripped up. So why in my mind is, why did this moment happen? Why did this memory happen? Like what was happening around them? What were the forces that pulled them into this moment? So those, it's, right back to basic writing and how we, identify things as the 5 W's, just in this order helps people think through the memory so that when you get to the digging deeper questions, which is importance, feelings, and then the final question. So why is this moment important to you? That starts our reflection piece, and it helps people think about like, why is it important? How did it make you feel in that moment? Did it have an impact on them? Was it something like, did this moment change or influence or change their perception of something? Did they do something different later in their life? Those are all follow-up questions that you can add on to these. These are just the basics. The last question I like to ask is, what do you want people to remember about this moment? This question is a great way to tie everything in. And sometimes when I ask this question, people will actually answer with a whole new story. They'll think of something else. This framework is really great if you're able to do long-term projects. It can totally be a standalone thing. It can be something that a family could use on a visiting hour. But what do you want people to remember about this moment? Usually there's a life lesson in there. And instead of saying, what's the best advice you'd leave for your kid? Or like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? All you want people to do is remember something. People usually can answer that question pretty much more easily than like, what's the best advice you'd like to leave? Or like, what do you want your kids to remember about you? Those questions are super hard to answer. So this is a really great wrap-up question. And I always try to make sure we end with that. So that's the framework. And we're at another practice exercise. So I do have an actual link for this, so you're not out in the ether somewhere. And oh, okay, bye Karen, we'll see you in a second. So this Google Doc should pull up a practice exercise. It has the basic questions and just for you to have as the framework. Usually what I do is we have what I found is that if we do storytelling sessions in groups of 2 first, and then you have like smaller 2 pairs, no, not 2 pairs, 1 pair, that dynamic that happens one way. So we're going to practice that together. And then the second session is a dynamic of 4 people. So in a storytelling session, if you're able to do it in person, this is coming from that framework of having students working with residents. Usually if you have 4 people in a room or in a group, there's 2 interviewers, 2 storytellers. And if one interviewer isn't as strong, the other interviewer can pick it up. And again, with the storyteller, if they're not as strong with answering or they're not sure to answer, the other storyteller can answer. So having sets of 4 people together allows for a little more ebb and flow in the conversation, instead of having 2 people trying to pound through like interview questions essentially. So 4 makes it feel a little bit more like a conversation rather than a hardship. So, and this came from doing those beta projects of like, what is the best way to do this and why do we do it this way? So those are really good guideposts if you are going to take this back and use it as an activity. So Karen's going to come back and that's I'm just gonna grab copy paste one more thing. So for the first session, we're going to start with favorite childhood memory. You can open the doc or use the questions in the chat. And Nikki, let's do 2 per room for 5 minutes. And we'll let Karen come back in and you can pop me in a room so we can stay even. Okay.
Okay. It will take just a second. If I have to
Sure.
do any moving around, I'll do that.
Okay. You guys can go in alphabetical order. So if you're alphabetically first, you'll be the interviewer and then swap it. All right. Let our humans come back. Does anyone have anything that they want to share? Either because they like heard an awesome story or they're like, oh my gosh, there was this light bulb moment that happened. Or again, if you thought it was a terrible exercise. Katie, you came off mute.
Yes, I did. I have a story that I didn't get to share because I got called away for a quick moment. But I wanted to share this story because it's a fun memory for me. Well, I guess I could get off so people can see what I look like. Can see my dog in the background too. So one of my favorite memories is when I was with my best friend. She and I have been friends for 23 years, and I am 23. We live next door to each other. We're still super close, and she's just like a sister to me. And one of my favorite memories is when her and I teamed up on my older brother to prank him. Because my brother and I are 8 years apart, so I always needed like someone to team up with me, because he could always obviously just take over. So what we did was try to scare my brother.
Yeah.
That was our prank. And we got to, oh boy. So we were hiding in certain areas in my house.
Okay.
And we were just like, and he thought that we were at her house.
Okay.
So he didn't know anybody was home. And we were probably about 8, maybe.
Yeah.
And so my brother was 16. And we were just like making these like little noises like throughout the house.
Yeah.
And then the one thing that happened was then we stood in this hallway where it was like so dark in our house.
Right.
And we heard my brother coming up the stairs. And we just like stood there like the twins from like The Shining. And he like jumped and screamed, and it was just a hilarious moment that we got to share and always treasure, because it was the one time that we got to scare my brother, and my brother like laughed at it eventually. But it's just a fun story to always have, and my best friend and I still talk about it to this day. So
I love it. So if you were to pick something that you want people to remember about this moment, what would that be?
That just look on how simple life was now. Like you don't really have moments like these now in like adulthood. And you don't really get to go out. Like I was doing an activity with our residents the other day, and all it was just hitting balloons around with wands, and they were just laughing.
Yeah.
And they're like, I haven't done this in so long. It was just have a good laugh.
Yeah.
And so just to remember the times when you have a good laugh, and it's just good to have one every once in a while.
I like it. I think childhood antics, we need to bring those back to adulthood. Like,
Yeah.
I think everyone should have balloons to bat around with a wand. I like that idea.
For sure. And they were like, and I had to be like, no smacking each other.
Right? Yes.
Because they just love joking with that. And it's just so much fun. They really enjoyed it. I haven't heard them, and especially during like the pandemic and everything.
Yeah.
Really getting to hear them laugh was really great.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. So we're almost done. Let's see, 11:25. Do you guys want to do another set around? I'm gonna let you choose. So use the reaction. It's on your bottom menu. Do a thumbs up if you are good to do another practice round. We'll probably stick with 2 per room and do 5 minutes. And if you are like, no, thank you, use the X. So I'll give you like 30 seconds to vote. So we're voting on whether or not we do another practice round. Allie says yes. Does everyone know where your reaction things are? We got Karen says yes. Gabrielle says yes. Okay, I think that's enough. All right. Yeah, and Katie says yes. Okay, so that's over half. So we'll do, Nikki, usually I would do 4. Actually, it's just hard with, there's only, then you miss it. Okay, we're just gonna do 2 per room again. Nikki, let's do 5 minutes. Most embarrassing moment is the prompt I came up with for this one. And same thing, interviewer, if you're alphabetically first, you'll go first as the interviewer, and then try to switch it halfway. Okay, go ahead.
All right, here we go.
Thank you.
All the other rooms have 2 per room, and then there's just 1 person who didn't join, so we should be good.
Yeah, I was with Gabrielle and Allie the last time, and then Allie was in there, so I just popped out.
Okay.
Let them talk. And we're gonna do great on time, so which is good.
Hey, Dan, they're all in breakout rooms for about 3 more minutes. You're on mute.
I was wondering what was going on.
Yep, they're in breakout rooms.
Hey, Gail, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. How many? Do you have
Uh,
a
7?
so great. It's going okay?
Just adjusting
ended-
from last time.
We ended a little early, so I thought I'd hop on.
We're right. This is the last practice exercise. I have like 2 more slides, so we should end right before.
Great.
Yeah.
Did Nikki treat you okay?
Yes. She did great.
I was a little worried.
Well, you're lucky. The last time I went to unmute, someone here in my office started honking a squeaky toy and I hit it just in time. Because he was going to town on it and I was like, oh man,
That's amazing.
he's back
How's
to
he doing?
snoozing. Good, he's back to snoozing now. We're gonna go for a hike right after this.
And I am going to work from home for the rest of the day too after this.
Well, I'm actually not working today, so I'm going to not be working.
Okay. I
Just
mean,
so
why
you know.
should today be different than any other day, right?
Right, right. Who interrupted my day off today, Dan?
Oh, you're spending your day off with me. I feel
I am.
super special.
It was worth it. It was worth it. Then I'm gonna hike and mow my lawn because it's nice out.
Yeah, 72. It's 72 here. That's what the high is supposed to be, 72.
Yeah, it was chilly this morning. Like I went outside in just like shorts and a t-shirt and I was like, nope, let's go back in and get some
We gotta
hoodies
go
on.
fix this.
We both had our hoodies on this morning, so
We got 61 here, so it's nice, but it's a little chill.
I may have missed time. Are we about 4 minutes out? Usually I give the 1 minute.
Probably. We have to be getting close. You always forget how long 5 minutes actually is.
Well, you would think I would look at my clock every time and I forget. Dan, how did your session go?
It was good. She didn't have slides, which I was a little fearful of, but she talked well and got some people engaged, which was more than you usually get for Zoom. And you know, Jill Moore is she's just a funny lady. I mean, she has a crack for everything. So that first session went really well.
Good, good. Well, Dan, I'll process this video tomorrow, so you'll have it available.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the room. It gives them 60 seconds, but some people decide to pop back early. And I'm going to turn my video off because no one needs to see me.
Bye. Oh, there's more people. I like it. All right, we almost got everybody. And we're almost in the home stretch. Did we lose? Gabrielle? Oh, they're probably waiting on their room. Did everyone have fun with that? You can do thumbs up reaction if you don't want to come off video. I get it. Or mute. Smiley faces. Yay. We get hearts now too. That's exciting. Hearts too. Let's see. And Allie. Awesome. Okay. All right. Now we have everybody back. So we are in the home stretch. Is there anything is anyone dying to share anything? Like a 30-second share from that breakout room? No. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll do our last couple slides and you guys can go do the rest of your day. All right, so thank you for, first of all, for participating and indulging me in doing those practice exercises. I know it's hard to go into a room of people you don't know and be forced to have conversation. So I appreciate your participation and whatever energy you were able to bring in today. So to close us up and bring everything back around and add a couple pieces, if you're wondering like what really to do next with some of this, I wanted to talk about actually documenting their story. I always, of course, like to encourage people to document their story, whether it's in a lined notebook that they keep. I've seen people keep composition notebooks. Sometimes it is art. They might paint instead or do pottery. Usually it obviously depends on what your client's abilities are, what the situation is, and what they have access to. But it can be as simple as a short assessment of how they're feeling that day and why. Usually if they keep a record of that and you're able to go back and look, over time, it will actually show patterns of feelings and behaviors and presentations of different things that happen in their day. Sometimes is impacted by what happened the day before or what happened in a care situation. So I have found that it's important to have those records as much as we can, even if they're just like on a range of 1 to 5, like how good was your day? And then if we can find out a couple of reasons why maybe it was bad, we can avoid those things in the future. Additionally, or alternatively, it can be as in-depth as actually doing a full storytelling exercise where you would get so much more information. End products can be journal entries, paintings, drawings, poems. I've seen people do a lot of different things. I do give guidelines on the website just to help people make decisions because sometimes it's hard for people to see an intangible end product. So I've tried to give some tangible things. So that's on documenting. It's also really important to get family involved as much as we can. I know in every situation it's not possible for a variety of reasons. So, assess what's happening with your particular clients, your group, and your facility, and make decisions based on that. So just encouragement is super important. The 5-minute storytelling scripts can be used as a resource for families. They're free and completely available. They're storytelling activity kits to help families structure visiting hours. I mentioned the 52 weeks of storytelling videos. Those are all free access on YouTube. Those are great ways to help get family involved and give structure without you physically having to be in the room. And again, end products that they can work on together are writing journal entries together and, working on things together. So guess what? Thank you. So the links, this will get sent out, I believe, Dan, for access to look at and click on. So these are clickable links. 5-minute storytelling scripts are at 5minutestorytelling.com. It's just a simple email opt-in. I don't send spam. And then the legacy recorded storytelling method is on the legacyrecorder.com website. It also has over 100 pages of like pre-done prompts where we walk through I've written specific prompts for like all those questions. Those are written specific to each storytelling prompt. So that's what I have. That's it. Thanks for hanging out. Any questions before we get kicked out or before they close?
We're not going to kick you out or close, but Gail, thank you so much. If you do have questions, you can still add them in the chat box. And I'm going to check right now. Just a couple of thank yous. Just once again, this session has been approved for 1.5 NCTRC credits or 1 CEU. If you fill out the SurveyMonkey link that's on the screen, and it's actually in the chat box. Dan, thanks, I had it, believe it or not. And your code word when filling out that SurveyMonkey is story time. So again, story time is what you need for your NCTRC credits or CEUs. Go ahead and complete that SurveyMonkey when you're done, and we will have the recording and slides available. So Gail, again, we appreciate it. It was a fantastic session. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I think if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away, or just share your final words with Gail.
No pressure. You're welcome, Allie.
I was just going to say that I think that sometimes we put a lot of pressure into storytelling, and you made it really simple and a reminder that, you know, general communication can have meaning. And if we're asking open-ended questions and incorporating it into our interventions, that we can really come out with a tangible for the family as well.
Thank you. Such fun feedback. I like that.